Okay, so this is a little bit about Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus, and that's the name for MERS coronavirus. This is kind of how it started. So there were a couple little outbreaks in 2012, and then it went away, and then it came back with a vengeance in 2013, and then much bigger in 2014. And people thought, oh my gosh, by the time we get to 2015, this is going to be terrible. And it's been back every year ever since. There are ongoing cases, since 2014. And this is another one of those coronaviruses, but this one is a very dangerous one. It's the most fatal coronavirus because about 1 out of 3 people that catches the virus will eventually die from the virus. So much more severe than SARS coronavirus 1 or 2. And this kind of shows you the way it could spread and did spread. So there were lots of people in South Korea that were working in different places. So this is a virus that originated in, we think probably Saudi Arabia, just the Arabian Peninsula, that entire area. But there are cases all dotted around the Middle East. It seems to originate in bats and then go to camels, but we'll get to that a little bit in a minute. And so this is what happened. We had one person come back from doing contract work somewhere on the Arabian Peninsula. I don't remember where, it might be UAE. And went back to South Korea, and then this person reported sick at the hospital. And it took a while for the hospitals to even, consider doing a test. This is the sort of thing that seems to happen over and over again at the beginning of coronavirus outbreaks. You got somebody that is really concerned that they might be very ill and might have a very bad virus. And so some people who should listen don't listen. Anyway, so as you can see, it goes on, and then one starts to infect. It starts out with nurses at the hospital, and then it goes on to other people. And eventually, over the course of just a couple of weeks, you go from one case to almost 190 cases. I think they ended up with 186 in this particular outbreak before they finally got it absolutely squashed and over. And as a result of this, they were quarantining thousands of people. And here are the deaths that were mounting. And so, 36 dead out of 186 infected is actually a really good rate. That's very low for Middle East respiratory syndrome, which is about 1 out of 6 cases, maybe a little more than that. Okay, so around this time, around 2014, people started to get really serious about, okay, where's this virus coming from? This may even be from late 2013. I'm trying to remember. And so they started looking at different kinds of animals to see if the animals had antibodies. And so all the green dots are antibodies against MERS coronavirus. The red dots are antibodies against normal human coronavirus, OC43, which has lots of versions that infect all kinds of different animals, cattle, for example. And the blue over here is SARS coronavirus. The dotted line is the limit of detection, so everything below the line is probably a false positive or, just not something that you can really believe. And as you can see here, the cows did not have any of these, but they had some antibodies against OC43, which are probably cross-reacting with one of the cow coronaviruses called bovine coronavirus. Or just beta coronavirus 1, I think is the new name for that. And then over here, you've got sheep, which had some evidence of MERS-like viruses, interesting, and a whole lot of evidence of a common cold-like virus. You got a similar thing in goats. They had a lot of evidence of a common cold-like virus, but none of the MERS-like virus, interestingly. And you got camels, which had nothing, and wow, every single camel they checked was positive for MERS antibodies. And this turned out to be true in a lot of places. They would check camels, and the babies being born did not have any antibodies. But after just a couple of months, all these camels would catch MERS coronavirus, and they would then have antibodies for the rest of their lives. So eventually they figure out it is a receptor protein called DPP4, which is dipeptidyl peptidase number 4. And so they looked at the DPP4 enzymes from different animals. And so here's all the animals over here, and the ones with a star are the ones they looked at in the study. And they found that mouse version did not allow the virus to enter at all. But the human version allowed the virus to enter very nicely. They looked at one from one particular bat. I don't recall if this is the exact bat that we think the virus came from, but it was kind of in the middle. But yeah, goats, camels, and horses all seem to have receptors that could let the virus in. It just so happened that the virus was only coming from camels, but this was more to do with luck than anything else, apparently. Yeah, so the virus could grow in a lot of different animals, which seems to be the case with more and more viruses. This is something new that we've learned. Okay, so here's one of these little cuties. Yeah, look at that. This is one of the bats that has been found to have the MERS coronavirus. This is Pipistrellus, the Vesper bat. Yeah, I think it's just adorable. These things range all the way across Europe and Asia. They are very common. They come out in the evenings and fly around, and I think they eat little insects. Here's another one. Tylonictris is a bamboo bat, and there are others related to the bamboo bat in Africa that also carry MERS-like coronaviruses. And so, yeah, once again, these are just adorable. But these are what you would call microbats. So you can see the size. That's somebody's fingertips there holding this little thing. It's, like chicken nugget sized, approximately. Yeah. Okay, what else do we need to know about this virus? So it's structured pretty much the same as a SARS coronavirus. And I think I even compared it to SARS coronavirus way back in, it was probably week 1 of the course. But what we've learned from MERS is that it's constantly evolving. And again, this should probably sound familiar. This is true of most every virus. But this is a virus that kind of disappears from humans and then reemerges into humans. So it's always churning in the bats, and it occasionally spills over to the camels, and then occasionally it spills back over to the humans. And it usually happens in the spring, which is around when the baby camels are born most commonly. But each time it spills over, it's a slightly different version of the virus. And so over here on the side, you can see the different parts of the virus. This ORF1AB, that's all the enzymes that copy the virus and make a little sort of structure where it can be copied. And that's about 2/3 of the genome. And you'll see it's just a few of the changes here because mostly those parts are not visible to the immune system. So even though it's most of the genome, you don't get a whole lot of changes there. Where you get a lot of changes are in the red region, which is, of course, the spike gene. There we go. And that's because the spike gene is subject to antibody and T-cell attack. And so it has to change, or rather we kill off all the ones that don't change. As do the bats, as do the camels, apparently. And so the virus would change. And every time it jumped to humans, it would change a lot in humans. It would particularly change the spike. But while it was just happily growing in some bat somewhere, then you would see a lot of changes, but they were mostly changes in the self-copying enzymes up here. Because it was already very well adapted to jump into the bat. So every time it goes into a human, it's got to relearn how to infect humans, basically. It can get in a little bit, and then it adapts and gets much better at getting in. So, lastly, the demographics of who this thing hits. At the beginning, this was very much like SARS coronavirus 2, a disease that was much harder on males than females, and much harder on the old than the young. Now, the old versus young thing, that definitely stayed the case. But the male versus female, so the males are on this side, if I remember right, and females are over here, males and females. And so you can see it's much more, this is, I think, total cases, and this is deaths. You see it was a very sexist virus. There we go. But after a couple of years of evolution, it learned how to infect women just about as well as men. So there we go. equal opportunity virus now. What's the disease look like? Essentially, it looks like any other severe human coronavirus disease. You have all this, what they call ground glass opacity, which is just like, white powdery little shreds all in there, which is basically destroyed parts of the lung that are filled in with a lot of fluid. There you can see the heart, and you can see all these sort of white bits down there. Should not be there. That is a very bad looking lung. This person has at least the top of their lungs working pretty well. This one lung is pretty much shut down. The other lung has, at least a little better than half breathable space. But yeah, very hard virus on the lungs. A lot of long-term damage, much more severe, and lasts for years and years, as is the case in SARS coronavirus 1. And yeah, we'll see if this is the case in SARS coronavirus 2, but the early indications are that it's maybe a little milder and you heal up a little bit better. But we'll find out. We learn about all these things in time. Okay, and I think this is the last bit. So these are human airway epithelium cultures, which is cells from somebody's lung. And you just take these cells, you have like individual single cells, and if you put them in a special little plate that exposes this side to air and this side to a nice sort of food medium, then they will organize themselves, and they'll have little cilia on the top, and they'll make a little mucus layer. There you can see the little purple mucus layer, very cute. And they'll basically form a lung for you, like lung tissue. And you can then go in and try to infect this. And so compared to SARS coronavirus, which you could get that thing to grow to, 10 to the 9th virus genomes per milliliter, which is a lot. This thing grew much worse. So EMC was an early name for MERS coronavirus. And you can see this one grows to 10 to the 12th. So it grows, 10 to the 3rd better. So that's 1,000 times better than SARS coronavirus. So it makes just 1,000 times more in the lungs. Very severe cytokine storm. Same thing as, in so many other severe lung diseases caused by viruses, including coronaviruses. So there you go. That's a little bit about MERS corona.